Hi everyone. I've decided to make a little bit of a reappearance. Um, I wanted to do a little bit of a read aloud tonight based on a chapter that I did with my book group today, and just give people a little bit of an update on the garden here at Maragold Cottage. Made a lot of progress so far, and even though it's cool, I've got a little flannel on. We were up in the 90s in April, and then it sort of backed off a little bit, and we've had a very wet few days. And I'm in the process of sort of putting to bed my spring garden and all the things that were the first round of the garden. And it's so nice to be here in the South, where you really can start gardening in the beginning of March, and to sort of prepare for high summer and clearing out things like the overgrown bok choy and radishes and turnips, and making room for okra and beans and summer squash and some more flowers. So that's how I spent my day today. We've had a lot of rain, and I've been digging up still swaths of my lawn. The front yard is my newest project, and I'm cutting a big, like 3 or 4 foot wide bed across most of the front of the lawn. And I have a whole bunch of perennials arriving on Wednesday. And it was very difficult because I couldn't, the ground was essentially pudding. And so I was trying to like lift the sod off and get things ready for adding compost and stepping stones. But between the rain and the holiday weekend, that didn't happen. So it will all work out. It will all work out in the process. But I just want to say everything is looking amazing. And when things were kind of rough, in this transition. And at one point I just said, I'm going to make my corner of the world beautiful. And so far I have, with the help of the plant devas and the seeds and the sun and the rain. This little cottage yard is getting beautiful. Not the lawn part. I'm not a good lawn person, but the flower part is great. And so I had a phenomenal spring display in February and March, and then it was looking a little leggy before the summer stuff grew in. But the last couple weeks, the poppies have showed up, and I've lived in the city for most of my adult life, and I never had room or sun to grow lots of flowers. I worked at a garden, but I wasn't a gardener. And so it's just really nice to be able to sort of make things and make this big, abundant cottage garden. And so I have 2 big beds shaped like hearts in my front yard. And I have a circular bed with my herbs. And then I keep pawing away at bits of lawn around all of the edges. And I've added, when I moved into the house, there were very few trees or shrubs. This very overgrown crepe myrtle hedge in the back. Sorry about that. I don't know what that was about. I have my water here in case I need it again. But yeah, there were very few shrubs. I had a hedge in the back of crepe myrtle, which was all overgrown, and I've tended that, and a fig tree that had been frozen down to the ground a few years ago, but was rebounding, and I pruned it nicely this winter. And so I added a pink dogwood. I wanted small trees because I did want to keep the sun, and I don't want the expense of really big trees, but I put in a pink dogwood and an Ann tulip magnolia. And in the back, I put in a redbud and a wintertime Yuletide camellia and a viburnum. And these are all small. They're going to, it'll take a while to get bigger. And I'm expecting a couple of winterberry holly and red twig dogwood and a hydrangea. So those are all coming, and I'm really excited. Oh, and I put in a magenta butterfly bush. So yeah, everything is going to be amazing. The heart-shaped beds, they've got cosmos now and lavender. Lavender does great here in Arkansas. And the marigolds are starting. The Cracker Jack marigolds, which are like the really tall ones, are starting to do their thing. And the cleome, which everyone's like, what are that plant that looks like it has pot leaves? I'm like, it's not pot, it's cleome. Their like white and purple heads are sticking up. And oh, and my lovely neighbor next door, she loves starting things from cuttings. And so she had given me two lovely, fairly large, like, 2.5 foot tall gardenia bushes, and one of them, they took a while to settle in, and I was really worried that I was going to kill them, but they hung in there, and one of them is blooming profusely, and it smells so great, and it's a little bittersweet because those are my wedding flowers, but it's nice to see the gardenias. And let's see what else. Alliums. I have a bunch of the little kind of alliums, not the really expensive ones. And Sweet William and the calendula and what else? Oh, chamomile. The chamomile is coming. And lobelia. And the zinnias they haven't bloomed yet, but they're picking up speed. And I dug out the whole north side of my side yard, and it's all mulch, and I put in beds, and I have summer squash in there that I planted last week that are starting, and I've got the little swale with all of these rocks that I've dug out of the yard, and I've intermixed those with herbs and celosia and some impatiens and basil, and it's all starting, with the heat just to get big and lush and abundant. And then let's see, in the backyard, my hedge, I turned the overgrown hedge into trying to make the crepe myrtles into small trees, like multi-stem trunk trees. And to my friend who sent me the tin of wildflowers from Arizona, I winter sowed those in jugs, and then initially in little salad tins, and they sprouted immediately. And I was like, oh no, there's not enough headroom. So I put them in 10 different jugs, and then they kept going, and then they were outgrowing the jugs, and they were the early ones, and I hadn't dug all the beds yet. So essentially I tucked them in under the hedge, just being like, do what you can, and they were all really crowded and everything. And I just like had little chunks and little plugs, and I plugged them all in, and now they're just beautiful, like balsam and baby's breath and poppies, and they're just putting on a big show. And my neighbor behind, who he likes to kibitz. He's an early holder of Bitcoin. So like we talk blockchain over the fence, and he was kind of skeptical about my garden, but now he's like, oh, it's looking really good. So I have a beautiful hedge full of abundant wildflowers underneath, and I ended up having to do a little brush killer on the poison ivy because it was coming back pretty strong, but I think we've come to an agreement. So, and back there, I added some blanket flower and some yarrow, and so I have a central area of the garden that when I moved in, it was black landscape fabric covered by crabgrass and surrounded by cinder blocks. And so someone agreed to take the cinder blocks away for me, which was great. And then I pulled the landscape fabric up, and I put cardboard down, and I mulched all of it. And then I have 4 raised beds that are like 3 by 6 feet. 2 of them have like an arbor between them. And in one of them, I have a bunch of eggplant, which I've never grown eggplant, and I'm going to really need to learn to like it because there's a lot. And like the Chinese eggplant plant, it's already 4 feet high, and each plant has like 20 blossoms on it. So that's kind of amazing. I don't really see it setting fruit yet, but if they do, I'm going to have a lot of eggplant. And then there's a Rosita eggplant, which is the more tear cup kind. And then I planted way too many cucumbers, and I thought the cucumbers would climb on the arbor, but not really. I'm trying to drag them over. So that was a lesson learned. Fewer cucumbers, and you need to give them strings or something better to climb on. But I'm already harvesting like a bunch, and it's so fun to like give produce to neighbors. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people here, this is no novelty, but for me, it's actually pretty special, and that I have lovely neighbors. And like yesterday, one of my neighbors, she's just got a job, and she's being an assistant in one of the schools, and her daughter, who's 4, is starting school, and so they used to stop by all the time, and so they came in, and I sent them home with kale and cucumbers and basil, and I gave my neighbor behind some cucumbers tonight. So here's some of my cucumbers, and I still have like 4 or 5 tomorrow, which is cool because I got an invitation to go out on the lake, so I'll have something to bring. And I was clearing out, like I said, all of the spring stuff, and I had planted these little hikori turnips, like the little Asian ones. And this is sort of my problem with being just a single person and also working really hard to get the garden set and all the infrastructure and everything dug and the pavers laid and the soil amendments in and everything weeded, is that I'm not always good at the harvesting or keeping up with the eating part of it. So these little turnips that are like normally supposed to be, you know, yay big, it's turned into like this, right? But I had some last week and I peeled them and they weren't too woody, like, so I could sort of dice them up and still eat them. So anyway, I have like 10 of these in my refrigerator, and I have to figure out if I can turn them into like turnip fries or chips or something that will be palatable to share with other people. So yeah, so I'm having a lot of fun there. And my asparagus bed is going, and I've got sweet alyssum, big piles of white sweet alyssum flower, and the strawberries are really expanding, and I figured out a way of putting these little net bags on the bunches of strawberries so the mockingbirds, I give them some, but they don't get all of them. And let's see what else. The peas are done. That's what I had to do today. They've got all mildewy, but I got a lot of snow peas and pod peas, and I took some pod peas to one of my groups that I attended, a whole big bowl, and we all just ate fresh peas out of the pod, and it was awesome. And what else? Yeah, the kale is doing good. I've got beets growing, and what else? Oh, I built a big tomato cage. I kind of joke because as I'm digging up all this grass, I make a big pile, and then I have these tubs. I can put 6 tubs in my Subaru, and then I take the tubs to the municipal compost center, and they have a big area. One is for sort of limbs and trees, and the other is like leaves and grass, whatever. And so I dump the stuff that I've taken out of my yard there, and then I go fill up, and they have great wood, 3 different sizes of wood chips and leaf mulch and different things. But then the giant brush pile, you can't take a chainsaw, and I don't have a chainsaw. I'm not super confident in using a chainsaw, but you can just pull stuff off the brush pile. And so I do have like little pruning saws and loppers, and so I call it the stick store. And so it's giant. But depending on who's just come and dropped stuff off, like the crepe myrtle trees, when they come and prune, they're really good and straight. And so I've gotten a lot of crepe myrtle. There was green bamboo, which I know, like, I'm not putting it near the ground, but I have some metal posts that I can attach it to and like make my own trellises for cheap. So it's kind of like I'm a kid and playing forts again. And so I've made a lot of structures with things from the free stick store that I unfortunately, my Subaru, it's a hatchback, but it doesn't have a roll down window. So I can only go 6 feet, but it's pretty fun making trellises and weaving, vines and branches and stuff. And so I have one with tomatillos, and I have another one with these cucamelons, and I had peas on one of them. I have a couple little tomato cages that I made out of sticks. So that's really cool. And then I have my stone swale that goes through the side yard that carries all the downspout water. It goes all the way around the back, around my little sun porch. And they have these like little basins to kind of slow down the water and hold it and let it soak in. And then at the end, though, we get really big storms. So it pretty much everything fills up, and then it just push and rolls off into the grass and way down to somebody else's yard. But I do have a lot of water. And so I feel really blessed to be in a place with sun and mostly clear skies often, and water. And we've had a few forays by the deer. My neighbor had a privacy fence that was falling apart, so she took it down, and then the deer kind of found her rose garden, which they really like to eat roses, and that makes her very sad. And then they wandered into my yard, and they ate some of my redbud, and they ate my little mimosa tree. But it's coming back. Both of those things are coming back, and it doesn't seem to be a habit. So it's not decimation. It's just an intermittent nibbling, which I can live with. And then I have, at least one, if not more, bunnies that come. But I watch them, and they don't eat anything but the grass. I don't know. They don't eat the pansies. They don't eat the lettuce. Had beautiful lettuce. And again, that all started to bolt this week. So I had to pull that up, and I'm going to plant some new. But they didn't eat the peas. They didn't eat any of the tasty things. They just sit and they hop around on the paver stones, and then they eat the grass. So I'm fine with that. And I enjoy watching them. So, and it's still like the bird kingdom here. And, now that I'm sleeping with my windows cracked at night and in the morning, you can just hear the birds waking up the world, and it's like the best alarm clock ever. So yeah, this corner of the universe is really awesome. And I've had friends over. We've had salad with edible flowers from my garden, and it's special. And I feel like I've I've settled in here really well, and there's good people around me, and they may not totally get me, but they think I'm interesting. So I think that's awesome. And oh, and I'll just show you behind me. I can kind of see I have this new sculpture, which is awesome. And my friend Gigi made it. She's a former naturopathic large animal veterinarian who worked in elephant rescue and then became a sculptress welder of scrap metal. And she had an open studio a couple weeks ago. So this is called Timelessness. And those are projector wheels. And I see them as sort of like all of the multiple eyes, the I of I am, and how we sort of project ourselves into the world, and that time is cyclical. And I've been spending some research time the last month or so looking into Arthur M. Young, who was the inventor of the Bell helicopter, but also very involved in psi research. And he had many copious journals of his early life and his life as an inventor, and then later in life. And he became very interested in astrology. So he started going back through his journals at significant points in his life and doing these astrological transits. And so a lot of the diagrams, astrologically speaking, reminded me of this timelessness sculpture and the projection. So anyway, this is sort of my time navigation tool, and it's gonna be sitting, with me over my mapping chair, where I sit here and do time jumping and constellating and such things. So beyond the garden update, and just to let you know I'm doing okay, I'm part of a book group, and we've been reading, I think I read some of it before, but it's called, and I know this is backwards, so I'm just going to read it, The 13 Original Clan Mothers by Jamie Sams. And I think it's from the 90s. And a lot of the women in this book group, it's a pretty good sized group, like maybe 15 people at this point, had read it before, or have read it several times. And I think there's even maybe some oracle cards or something that go with it. But they were wanting to revisit it. And it's really nice being in the company of like really smart and thoughtful women. And so we're doing one chapter a month, which is awesome. And this is our 6th chapter for June. And it's with the new moon is when we do it. And so this morning, often I kind of postpone, and usually the sessions are at 1, but this time it was going to be a garden thing, but that got rained out. And so it was going to be earlier in the day because it was usually hot by 1 p.m. here in May, but it's cool today and rainy. But we ended up still having it in the morning. And so I woke up first thing and I'm like, oh, I need to read that chapter before I go to the book group. And really over the last few months, like in addition to the garden, I've been sort of immersed in this idea of story a little bit, and how, revisiting my earlier talk that I had given about Robert Anton Wilson and reality tunnels and things, and the stories that we live inside. And, I remembered early on during all the lockdown stuff, and I kept I think I said it out loud once or twice, but like, we need to figure out how to tell a better story. Because there's so many stories out there right now that are, it really cause a lot of internal dissonance or disharmony, and being disconnected from that and really grounding on the land, because that was sort of my New Year's resolution, was to be grounded in this place. And for the most part, I leave my phone and everything in here. I'm not listening to podcasts while I'm digging. It's just me and my shovel in the dirt, because this is all just very hands-on, slow garden work. And in being grounded, and then just realizing the abundance, like the crazy abundance that is part of the natural cycle of this world. And I felt a little guilty because I had all of this produce that I hadn't eaten, right? Like this lettuce that was bolting and these turnips that were going to seed. Oh, my radishes. Oh, like who knew these radishes would be like as big as the turnips? I mean, seriously, huge. And they would get these amazing sprays of flowers, some of them white and some of them light pink. And I had occasion, I used some to make a heart, and it turns out that radish flowers are said to keep away evil spirits. So, I mean, I was like, and radish seeds are big for seeds. I mean, they're not as big as sunflower seeds, but you can see them. They're not like nicotiana, which are just dust, but they're tiny, relatively speaking. And then they go from this tiny little seed to something that's like, the root is as big as a softball, and then the stalk is an inch around, and then it's got 8 different arms spinning around with all of these flowers. And it came from this, and soil and light and water and the resonance with the divine field, like with God. That's how it happens. And I had like 50 of them, right? And I had to, sort of say thank you for your service and then move them along because the beans are going to come and the squash is going to come. And it's a cycle. It's a cycle of life. So there is this amazing abundance out there. And so yeah, telling a better story. Like, what story can we tell? And so I've been kind of sitting with this idea of story and the stories that we live inside and how this shapes our reality, and then the challenges of navigating story in this world of crazy AI saturated feed forward systems and all of that. And I've just been sitting with this, and then I open the chapter, and the chapter is the storyteller for the day. And it's just, of course, these synchronicities happen. So I'm going to read they start with a little poem at the beginning. And this is the poem that starts, the clan mother of the 6th moon cycle, the storyteller. Tell me a story, sweet mother, of the ancestors and their days, of how they walked with beauty, learning the medicine ways. As you relate the stories, I am allowed to see the importance of every lesson and how it applies to me. Through another's example, I share the laughter and the tears. Through another's experience, I learn how love can conquer fear. Together we can journey through those other times, reclaiming all the wisdom of the legacies left behind. And so it was really moving for me this morning to sort of open this up and see the storyteller. And there's sort of a longer chapter, but within that, there's a section that is a storyteller telling the story of how the lightning bug became the lightning bug, right? Got its light. And I've seen a few fireflies or lightning bugs so far this season. I had kept big piles. So now I planted some trees in my yard, but I didn't really have my own trees. And so in the fall, when the leaves fell, because I also had made, I knew I wanted leaves to use for mulch. And so I grabbed all the leaves, like with permission from my neighbors. I have some older neighbors, and the house across the street was under renovation. And so I had sycamore leaves and sweet gum leaves and maple leaves and oak leaves. And I had a giant pile that I put down near the fig tree. And it was probably about, 6 feet wide and 6 feet tall. It was very big, and it compressed over time. And that's where I had my hundreds of jugs of 120 jugs of winter sown seeds. And I got almost all of them in the ground. I have 3 or 4 jugs of amaranth that I'm still waiting on to get a bed dug. But I really am proud of myself that I got so many of those. I kept, many of them are perennials like echinacea, milkweed, ironweed, blankaflower, yarrow, different things. So those around the perimeter of the garden, and then I'm keeping the annuals and the vegetables sort of in the center part so I can swap those out over time. So anyway, the leaves were a great bed, and then I think maybe some of those leaves kept the little larvae of the fireflies, and so I've seen a few fireflies. And so I'm going to read I'm going to read this little part of the chapter that tells that story of the firefly, and then I'm going to just sort of say what my input to the group today was about the story. Okay, so the telling of tales. Storyteller looked into the faces of the children who had gathered around her to listen to the stories she would share with her tribe's council of wee people, W-E-E, little ones. The fire was reflected in the expectant faces of the little ones, giving the storyteller an audience of rapt admirers. The love they felt for Storyteller came from the way the clan mother treated them with respect. Storyteller had taught the preceding generations of many clans and tribes that the children were full-grown spirits in tiny bodies. Hence, the Council of Children became the Council of Wee People. The night sky was moonless, bringing thousands of stars into view. This sleep began the new moon cycle of the ripening moon. The starry medicine bowl of the night sky gave everyone a sense that something spectacular was about to happen. The breeze carried the sweet perfume of mimosa blossoms that dangled from the branches of the tree people who encircled the clan mother's lodge. Lightning bugs danced in the air around the tall cattails. Wild mint and red clover lined the brook that snaked through the camp. Occasionally, fireflies would flicker and twinkle in the warm summer night. Storyteller decided that it was a perfect time to share the story of how the firefly got its blinking light. The children who made up the Council of Wee People were entranced by the clan mother, the stars, and the dancing fireflies, trying to decide what was more interesting to their curious minds. Nawa Skenyo, thank you for being healthy. Storyteller began with the traditional greeting that brought the children's wandering attention back to her. The little ones knew that this greeting was the formal sign that they were to settle down, to be very still, and to listen without interrupting. Storyteller only told short stories to this council of wee people because the youngest children, who had passed only 3 summers, had much shorter attention spans than the older ones, who were also part of the council. When a child passed his or her 11th summer, the boys moved to the Young Warriors Council and the girls joined the Council of the Butterfly, which prepared them for their budding and blossoming transformation into womanhood. Storyteller cleared her throat and began her tale. Many, many long moons ago, the firefly was known by another name. He was a star, and his name was Forgets to Twinkle. This little brother was a part of the great star nation and lived with his 7 sister stars, who are still shining brightly there in the sky. And Storyteller pointed to the 7 stars inside the constellation of the Great Buffalo, showing the children where to look. The 7 sister stars held the 7 sacred directions of east, south, west, north, above, below, and within, teaching all of us in the human tribe to honor the abundance that the Great Buffalo brings to us from every direction. Forgets to Twinkle was always sad because his sisters had the mission of holding the 7 sacred directions for the Great Buffalo, and he wasn't sure what his mission was. And he was so very sad that sometimes he let his light fade away, and that is how he earned his name, Forgets to Twinkle. One sleep, when Grandmother Moon was showing her full face, Forgets to Twinkle asked her for permission to leave the Sky Nation and go nearer to the Earth Mother to discover more about his purpose in life. Grandmother Moon said that Forgets to Twinkle could go, but that he should be careful not to get too close to the Earth. The Earth Mother's magnetism could hold him and keep him from coming home. Forgets to Twinkle agreed that he would pay attention and only travel when it was safe. And on the first sleep, Forgets to Twinkle traveled through the Sky Nation until he was hanging in the clouds above the sacred mountain. His heart was very happy because he could see all of the little sisters and brothers of the creature tribe playing in the moonlight, and he shouted down to Brother Coyote and asked if he could join in the play. Now, Coyote was known by all of the other animals as the trickster, but little Forgets to Twinkle did not know anything about any of the children of the earth because he had never been anywhere but the Sky Nation. Trickster Coyote shouted back that he would be delighted if his little star brother wanted to play with him. But Coyote thought Forgets to Twinkle was too far away. Forgets to Twinkle thought a moment and then decided to come closer, dancing in the sky while Coyote danced with him on earth. And Coyote started talking to the little star brother very softly, making Forgets to Twinkle come closer to hear what the trickster was saying. Softer and softer words of friendship brought the little star out of the sky until he was floating just over Coyote's head. Storyteller paused for a moment, allowing all the children to wonder what would happen next. When she had every wide-eyed face glued to hers, she raised her voice in increments, finally shouting at the scary part. And then that mean old trickster grabbed Forgets to Twinkle and gobbled him up. And the children gasped, and some squealed, forgetting their manners for a moment. Well, I suppose that all of you know how terrified Forgets to Twinkle was when he found himself inside the trickster's belly, and he was so upset he forgot to twinkle and did not know how in the world he was going to get out safely. Around that same moment that Coyote gobbled up Little Star Brother, Grandmother Moon looked down and noticed that Forgets to Twinkle was nowhere in sight. And she looked and looked, but she could not see her little star brother anywhere. And because she was concerned, she sent the Stars with Tails, who were her scouts, to look for little brother. And in those ancient times, the Comet people were messengers who could come and go from the great star nation. And these Stars with Tails searched high and low for little brother without any luck in finding him. And inside the trickster's belly, the little star brother was frightened, but he knew that he had better start remembering all the wisdom his 7 sisters had taught him, or he would never see them again. And after a long while, he finally remembered why he was called Forgets to Twinkle. He had always been afraid that his light was not as pretty as his sisters', and so he would only blink a little light here and there. And now that he was trapped inside the coyote's belly, he decided he'd better trust his ability to shine brightly, and he huffed and puffed and sent all of his light into his little star body, lighting himself up and shining as brightly as he could. And the trickster suddenly found that the trick was on him when his whole furry body lit up like Grandfather Sun. And Coyote ran and ran, trying to hide from the Comet Scouts that Grandmother Moon had sent to find little brother. The trickster had seen the Stars with Tails circling the prairies, looking for Forgets to Twinkle, and old Coyote had thought he could trick the Star Scouts as easily as he had tricked little brother. But now the slippery trickster was so bright that there was no place he could run or hide without the Star Scouts finding him, and in a panic, the trickster opened his mouth and spit little Star Brother out and then ran away. The Stars with Tails spread the news to the Cloud People, who told the Thunderers, who told the Fire Sticks, that the mean old trickster needed a taste of his own medicine, and the Sky Nation was filled with the little Star Brothers' angry relations who gathered the storms, filling the Cloud People with Raindrop People and Ice Beings who could wet and punch Coyote with their water and ice bodies. Hino, the Thunder Chief, belched his roaring roar, and the Thunderbird flapped his giant wings, bringing such enormous sounds that the trickster stood quaking in fear. Meanwhile, little Star Brother was trapped in the Earth Mother's magnetism. He could not move from that ground and go home. He was still shining brightly so that his sky relations could see where he was, but no one could rescue him because they would be caught in the planetary mother's magnetism as well. And he called out to the Earth Mother and asked her to release him and waited for her reply. The storm was moving across the land, giving the trickster a chance to run. As he finally found his paws and started to dodge the pellets of ice and freezing rain, lightning bolts crashed around him, and one fire stick hit him, finally catching his tail on fire. And Coyote ran and ran, trying to think how he could trick the Sky Relations and make them leave him alone. Little Star Brother finally heard the Earth Mother speak amidst the sound of the thunderers. Her voice traveled on the raging winds that accompanied the storm his relations had made. Forgets to Twinkle, you are going to have to live with the children of Earth now. If I release my magnetism, you will be able to go home, but all of my children will fall off the earth and go flying into the sky. You are responsible for forgetting to pay attention to Grandmother Moon's advice and warning. There is no way that I can help you without hurting my other children, and so you must stay here with us and decide what kind of creature you would like to become. Forgets to Twinkle was sad, but he knew that the Earth Mother was right. He had not paid attention, and he had been tricked into ignoring Grandmother Moon's warning. He wanted to be part of the Sky Nation and to see the world from above as he had always done when he had lived with his 7 sisters. He knew that he would never again forget to shine his light brightly, because he wanted his Sky relations to know where he was and that he remembered his family. He decided to tell the Earth Mother that he wanted to be a flying creature who would shine like a star. And the Earth Mother agreed and changed him into a flying creepy crawler of the insect tribe, and she put a tiny star in his tail so that he could twinkle at his Sky relations, reminding all the other little brothers and sisters in the great star nation what could happen to them if they did not pay attention to the wisdom of the elders. Even now, if Coyote hears thunder or sees a firefly, he will run away in fear. The trickster remembers that the fire sticks caught his tail on fire and that he had to jump into a pond to put it out. And some people say the fire sticks and thunder beings counted coup on Coyote, bringing victory and honor to Little Star Brother. And that is how Forgets to Twinkle earned the name Lightning Bug. His firefly tail lights up to remind Coyote of the only relations that ever out-tricked the trickster by catching his tail on fire. And when the firefly's tail lights up, we two-leggeds are reminded to let our medicine shine and to keep a twinkle in our eyes so that the trickster cannot fool us into following that crooked trail. And all of the children sat with open mouths or wide eyes, gaping at Storyteller, savoring the richness of Little Star Brother's story. So that was the story I wanted to tell. And just you can keep that in mind when you see the fireflies coming out as the weather gets warmer for you guys in the northern hemisphere as the summer progresses. And I know we're a little ahead of a lot of folks being down here in the south. But I also wanted to sort of say what I contributed to the group when we were having our discussions. And one of the first people to speak, there's a lot in this book about truth and knowing the truth and listening to the truth and assessing truth. And I think we often still feel conflicted about, again, with the information deluges, like truth. And personal truths and universal truths, and then how do we stay on track with the truth? And so I mentioned again the Robert Anton Wilson idea of the reality tunnel, and that no one is born into a vacuum. We're all born into a culture, and it's how we understand the model of how the world works. And for me, this also kind of fits in with the Carl Friston free energy principle, is that we have a model of how the world is supposed to be, and that's the truth of our understanding. And there's a depth to that tunnel, and some people are very deeply inside certain tunnels. Some people are less deeply inside. Some of us have journeys where we travel outside the tunnel we were born into and we explore other tunnels. We might inhabit multiple tunnels over time, and so our truth, we can only speak to our own truth, and often that truth is the truth at a particular point in time. And for me, I like to have my timelessness sculpture. What is time? And I keep thinking that time is really a cycle, which is why I love the arc of this. And it's an open-ended arc, and it's cyclical in nature. So there's like the eyes, repetition, but they're not all exactly the same. And so we go exploring, some of us, not everybody goes, it's no requirement, but like the Little Star Brother, where he started, he didn't feel like he was confident in shining his medicine, his gifts. And he was intrigued by what was outside the reality tunnel of the medicine bowl of the starry sky, and asked for permission to go. And again, there was guidance that you should be cautious, but a lot of times when we're exploring and seeing new ways of being, they're very captivating, right? And so sometimes it's like the Plato's cave. You walk out and you don't realize that once you've walked so far, you can't get back. And in the Star Beings story, there was this somewhat traumatic experience, right? It was a transformative experience. It was a going inward, right? Like the inside of the coyote, you got put into the trickster, right? And in that and it's almost like I've been spending time reading Peter Kingsley's books about incubation and incubating the you that you needed to grow into, right? And this may be a repeated process, and this was just one cycle, right, of leaving the sky, going to the coyote, and then coming back out into the earth with the other creatures. But there's this transformative process where you remember yourself, or you have to call on the resources that you have to continue to navigate life. And in that process, which is challenging, then you stretch yourself into this new being that you become. But often in that transformation, there's this sense of loss, right? So there's this bittersweet aspect of wanting to be able to go back, but realizing for whatever reasons, you can't go back the same way. But what I found really encouraging in the story was that there was this sense of the communication in the blinking of the light, of the signal, again, and I feel like we're all beings of light, that we have different kinds of light, and we're connected by, into a universe of love by the light that is within us, and that we can communicate through our light across dimensions, and that even maybe vast distances from a prairie, a wildfire prairie with fireflies, and the Buffalo constellation is not that far, right, to have this light-based communication. And so that nothing is ever, there's no permanent separation. There's just continued evolution and transformation and exploration of the world and new relationships and our gifts. And then I do feel like it's not linear, it's cyclical. So I'll just close tonight. One of the people who really helped connect me into this place is I call her my Sufi mystic fairy godmother, Pilar. And Pilar was one of the people, she's just amazing. She's in her early 80s, and she's moving back north to be closer to her children. And we're all going to miss her terribly. But I'm so glad that I got to spend these months with her. And she's just so generous in so many ways with her enthusiasm and perspective and gifts. And as she's been packing up her house, she has been finding bits and pieces of paper and things, and one of them was this poem. And so she had a friend make copies, and so as people have been calling on her to say their goodbyes, she's been handing out this poem. And so she gave one to me earlier this week, and I went over to her house, and she gave me a name blessing, and I took some irises from her yard, some purple irises that I'm excited to have. And so I just want to read you this poem to keep in mind. And it says Marcia J. Keith, 2015. And when I looked up who she was, I think she was from Ohio, maybe the Kent State area. I think Pilar lived there for a while, so maybe this was a poem she got when she lived there. But it's called Always Available. From a very early age, I knew there was just one thing, one single thing. But that was not what I was taught. Instead, a rigid plan of convincing began, of categories, of subjects and competencies, of titles and opinions. Separations meant belonging, meant identity. Years and years, decades stacked up, millions and billions of separate things needing to be seen, sorted, consumed, invested in, maintained. But thankfully, exhaustion offered another option. A necessary releasing of the buying into, of the building up, of the grasping and pushing and conquering, the endless stream of things. was not mine to control. Witnessing began. Plain, ordinary, everyday, everythingness. Seen, supported, no matter what, by the one thing always available. The love behind the world. One thing always available. Love behind the world. And we can witness it every day. And it might look like a turnip or cucumber. And all of the amazing communication, electrical, light, flow state, chi, prana, it just between all of the beingness that allows information to come, sort of miracles. And even though I got sent on my journey and kind of made it through the guts of the coyote, I've been given the gift of a chance to experience beauty firsthand and to be in community and and I just want my people up in the skies, my star people, to know that I'm okay. And that it's very important what story you pick. So pick a good story, write a good story, and you can always rewrite the script. My kid at one point was very interested in story. And it was right to be interested in that. It's super duper important. Witnessing began, plain, ordinary, everyday, everythingness, seen, supported, no matter what, by the one thing always available, the love behind the world. So thank you, Marcia J. Keith, and thank you, Pilar, for showing up in the world in such a generous, loving way and being a role model for us. We will miss you. Good night, everyone.